President Jacob Zuma has urged United Nations member states to adequately address the forcible displacement of people from their native countries, saying the worldwide refugee crisis was being fueled by underdevelopment. He was addressing the high-level meeting of the plenary UN Summit for Refugees and Migrants in New York on Monday. The president is expected to address the assembly shortly. Now, President Jacob Zuma will deliver the country's statement at any moment. Our correspondent in the US in New York, currently Sherwin Bryce-Pease, joins us to give us an update on this. Sherwin, what do you expect President Jacob Zuma to focus on?
Well, I tell you, we're running a little late here, as we do normally with heads of state that run overtime. Normally they speak for about 20 minutes each. Some go on for 45 minutes. The president was due to speak probably in the next 30 minutes. That's now been extended to the next hour. But Lulu, there are some staples that happen when the president of South Africa addresses the General Assembly. He's likely to touch on the lack of progress we've seen in the Palestinian and the Israeli question. He will again call on the United States to lift the embargo on Cuba. He will specifically mention the lack of independence for the people of Western Sahara, and then he will also, as he has done many times before, touch on the question of Security Council reform. That, of course, is a topic we can spend a whole day discussing. He will also touch on the implementation. This is speaks to the theme of this gathering in New York this year. He will speak at length about the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We saw a ceremony at the beginning of the general debate here earlier this morning, marking the one-year anniversary of the adoption of those goals. And then, of course, also update member states on South Africa's progress towards ratifying the Paris Climate Change Accord. Of course, step one was getting this adopted in Paris in December last year. The next step, of course, is bringing that agreement into force. The UN Secretary General hosting a mini-summit here tomorrow, where a number of countries will deposit their ratification instruments with him, apparently needing about 26 more countries to then bring this agreement into force, with the United States and China, the two biggest emitters in the world, already ratifying that agreement ahead of the G20 summit in China earlier this year. So, a number of topics that the president will speak to in his address in a short while.
Now, Sherwin, South Africa has been vocal about some reforms for some time now. You mentioned a lot that is expected of President Jacob Zuma to focus on. Let's touch on the issue of the Security Council, where South Africa is pushing to become a permanent member of.
Well, I had a chat with the International Relations Minister, Maite Mashibane, earlier this week about what South Africa has, if they have anything new in their toolbox regarding the reform question. And she said, well, this is not a song we sing anymore. It's something that needs to be implemented. It needs to happen now. And she said, look at the situation in Syria as a case in point. And I think what we'll see in President Zuma's discussion with the general membership of the United Nations in a short while is really linking some of the conflict concerns in certain areas, whether it be the Palestine-Israeli question, the issue of Western Sahara, Syria. He will link that to the unreformed architecture of the peace and security architecture here at the United Nations, particularly the Security Council. If you look at the question of Israel and Palestine, the United States is the one that tends to stand in the way of progress there. If you look at the question of Western Sahara, France tends to side with Morocco in that instance. Very powerful members of the Security Council. Russia on Syria, for example. So you find that even the Secretary General, in his address to the general debate, talked about how a minority of countries have sway here at the United Nations because of the unreformed infrastructure that tends to disallow the progress that everyone seeks. So expect the president of South Africa really to link specific instances to the unreformed architecture that we see here.
Now, world leaders have approved a declaration aimed at providing a more robust and a more coordinated humane response to the world refugee crisis. But now, political remains a territorial problem. How is the UN envisaging this document will help with it?
Well, the New York Declaration, as Minister Malusi Gigaba of South Africa, the Home Affairs Minister, told me yesterday, is a step in the right direction, but it clearly doesn't address all these concerns. It didn't, for example, it removed language from the declaration that would have allowed the resettlement of 10% of the world's 65 million refugees to developed countries. Clearly, powerful countries were not happy with that. We see it's a huge issue currently in the United States election, raised in particular by one of the candidates. So it's an issue that is fraught with many concerns. I can tell you, though, Lulu, that currently underway in the Trusteeship Council here at the United Nations, President Barack Obama is hosting a separate mini-summit on refugees where they are trying to close the humanitarian funding gap, a gap that currently stands at about $20 billion. We are expecting a number of pledges from a number of member states in order to close that gap and really move this process forward. But in terms of the New York Declaration adopted yesterday by member states, NGOs are the first to criticize that it does not go far enough. People need to put money where their mouths are, and I think President Obama and the United States leading in that regard here today.
Now, Sharon, how's the process of appointing Ban's successor unfolding?
Well, that's a very good question, and as much as many countries from the developing world, including South Africa, might have hoped for a female Secretary General, the first in the 70-year history of this organization, it's not looking very hopeful at this point. There have been a number of straw polls in the Security Council to give the 10 or so candidates that remain in this race a sense of what the thinking is in the Security Council regarding their candidature. We've had a number of candidates drop out of the race. There are about 9 left now, and the next straw poll will be held on the 26th of September. And that's ahead of really the Security Council changing the way they conduct that process to really deciding who it's going to be. The front runner currently is the former Portuguese Prime Minister, is the former High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres. I saw the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Russia endorsing his candidacy earlier this week. He is looking more and more like the sure bet to replace Ban Ki-moon, and that, of course, is bad news for all the hopefuls that were seeking the historic first woman of the United Nations.
Sharon, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us.